Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Bradburn. Alongside me is Logan Camden, and today we've got a wonderful NBA show for you guys. Christmas just a couple days away. Logan, what are you hoping for under the tree this year? What are you looking for in the stocking?
You wearing nothing.
Nice, dude. That's classic.
Maybe you with a nice little red ribbon I can tie off or something.
Oh,
I don't know.
Very perverse, but very classic, Logan. I'm actually having a full-size wax figurine of you made. Well, that's what I asked for. I hope I'm going to get that under my tree. It's beautiful.
Steal my identity.
No, I'm not going to steal your identity. It's just
like
I have a little
it's like
buddy
shrine.
version of you.
Oh.
It's like, if you go to, like, Madame Tussauds and you
Of course.
see
I'm very familiar.
all the various wax celebrities, that's what I want to have a version of you in my home at all times.
I love that. I think you know what? I'm going to search for one of you as well. I think that'd be
Well, you
nice.
have to get them custom made. They're not just out there, but they are flying off the shelves.
I'm not even going to have you're just going to be my Christmas tree. I think I'll string you up with lights and like put some ornaments on you, maybe a star at the top.
All right. This is a little weird for 75 seconds into the podcast, so let's get back to the basketball. Logan, the Denver Nuggets are doing some pretty crazy stuff offensively this year. In fact, as things stand, they currently have the best relative offensive rating in NBA history if they were to sustain this for the whole season. Where do these Nuggets rank among the best offenses we've seen this century?
I mean, I think they've got a pretty clear-cut argument to be maybe the best. Jokic is the primary reason why. We have to start with him. I think he's having the best season of his career, which is kind of staggering considering the lofty expectations. We talk about becoming numb to some players' greatness, and I feel like Jokic is just one of those guys where you can just kind of plod along every year and just look up, and the guy's averaging the most efficient triple-double you've ever seen in your life, which, again, is what he's doing again this season. 29 points, 12 boards, nearly 11 assists a game. He leads the NBA in assists per game. He leads the NBA in true shooting percentage. He's shooting 60.7% from the field, which is second in terms of his career high to 2023. He's shooting 42.5% from deep. That is a career high on the most three-point attempts per game in his career. And like I already mentioned, he is leading the NBA in true shooting percentage. He also has a career high in true shooting percentage this season of 71.1%. So you just got to start with Jokic. I think the best offensive player ever is having his best season ever, which is the kickoff point. So that gives them a pretty strong starting point. But when I look around him, like Jamal Murray has just bounced back to an actual all-star level this season, man. He's up near 25 points per game on 63.4% true shooting. It just reminds you of prime Murray and Jokic in the playoffs, man, where it's like pick your poison. You can either play off a Jokic in the pick and roll, or you can let Jamal Murray kill you with a tough bucket. He is one of the most elite and clutch, tough shot makers and pick and roll operators in basketball. On the periphery of those two guys, you've got Aaron Gordon, who is just an elite complement to these guys. He's giving you 19 points per game on 67.6% true shooting. He is a legitimate 40% three-point shooter at this point in his career, and he is a almost dream partner that you could put with these guys because of what he can do as a cutter and as a dunker. I feel the exact same way about Cam Johnson and his complementary skill set. So in totality, Carson, you just have a team that really has no weak points, nobody that you can help off of, which is a strength that I think this team has directly in comparison to some of the other offenses that we may talk about today. They've got elite spacing because they don't have any non-shooters on the floor. I think if you were to look towards some of these offenses towards the beginning of this decade, and obviously it's kind of disingenuous to compare them against different eras, so I won't do that in totality, right? The spacing advantage is kind of inherently correlated with the fact that they were playing in the modern NBA. That wasn't as important in the early 2000s, but I do think it's an advantage that this team has. And they just have elite complementary skill sets. I think this Denver Nuggets offense, they all fit each other like perfect puzzle pieces. I know that's a cliche, but I really do, man. I think Gordon fits this top duo so well. I think Cam Johnson, he has really picked it up after a slow start. I mean, since the start of November, the guy is giving you 13 points on 47% from the field, 44% from deep. I just think they all fit together so well. And when I look at the other candidates, man, it's like, I don't know, the 2016 to 2018 Warriors. If you want to take your pick, the 7 seconds or less Suns, Harden's Rockets. There's some other honorable mentions, too, that we can get into, and we can pick apart the head-to-head matchups. But I think I would go with this version of the Nuggets, man.
Over the 2017 to 2019 Warriors?
Here's my thing, and hear me out. Those Warriors teams, and I debated whether you go with the 2016 or 17 or 8, which version you go with. Because 2016, right, you obviously have you don't have KD here, but I think you have a significantly less weak point because in that starting lineup, you can go with a small ball look of Draymond, Iggy. Well, let me ask you this before I go into the semantics of this. Are we just going starting five, or are we going totality of the roster?
No, I'm talking about the offense.
Okay. Well, in that starting group, you wouldn't have as significant of a weak point. You'd be a little bit smaller, but you can go Dre, Iggy, Barnes, and you're not starting a non-offensively talented center. I just think even though that Warriors group obviously has clear top, I guess you can go small ball with Dre too.
Yeah, I mean,
I just think that
just
Jokic
went from death lineup to Hampton's five. They put together the best small ball lineup ever.
I was thinking head-to-head Denver just obliterates them because I don't really think anybody's hanging on to Jokic.
That's not relevant. We're comparing
I don't want to
offense
think about them
to
head-to-head. I was just thinking about having a weak point like a Zaza in your group, but I guess you could just bring Iggy back up and you have that
By the way, I would also say the Warriors offense, and it's not a head-to-head comparison. We're not trying to figure out who could stop the other, but they would barbecue the Nuggets even more than the Nuggets would barbecue them. Because
it is
as much
close
as
between those two offenses, though, bro. Like, I don't think it's like a runaway for the 2017 Dubs, even though they have Curry and KD.
So I have to disagree a little bit when you say that, like, there is a completeness to this Nuggets offense that those teams didn't have, just in the sense that I do still think we need to see it in the playoffs. There is a reason to me that the Nuggets offense last year, for example, did drop a bit in the postseason. Obviously, they drew the toughest possible matchup in the Oklahoma City Thunder, but MPJ was hurt. But the guy who I look at is Christian Brown, and the fact that he is still not a reliable catch and shooter, especially in a playoff environment.
I mean, he hasn't even been playing, though. I didn't even really consider Brown. I mean, he's been hurt,
he's the starter
right?
for this team. He's going to be the starter for this team.
They've had Peyton Watson and Spencer Jones in there.
Well, just listen to what I'm saying. CB is going to play vital minutes for this team because he's their best all-around two guard. The difference between this year and last year, and it's a significant one, is now they have Tim Hardaway Jr., who they can turn to, and he's an actual elite volume three-point shooter off the bench who can play 25-plus minutes a game for you. So that does make this offense more perfect, and I think it makes it one of the great offenses of all time because now they can legitimately go 4 out around Jokic. And even though Cam Johnson isn't the level of shooting weapon that MPJ was, he's still a very good shooter with great size. Aaron Gordon is so dramatically improved as a three-point shooter. These last 2 years now, he's been one of the most efficient from beyond the arc in the NBA with legitimate volume. So it is a very complete offense. However, I do think we kind of have to see what does CB's offense in a playoff environment look like and how does that affect the totality of this team offense, because I've seen a lot of people come up with the take that like Jokic's interior playmaking value isn't the same in the playoffs as it is in the regular season because teams will play super aggressively in terms of packing the paint, swarming him, sending multiple bodies, and taking away some of those cutting lanes for his teammates. But my thing is, Jokic can still create phenomenal three after phenomenal three for his teammates with his post-up passing. The only problem with taking away some of those cutting passing angles is when you have a teammate who is specifically dependent on those cuts for their scoring, like Christian Brown is. And during the regular season, I mean, their connection in terms of a big to guard cutting, it's pretty much second to none in the NBA. Like, Jokic is just so prolific in dotting him up there. I do think that is worth noting, and I do still think I would just take the overwhelming talent of the 2017 to 2019 Warriors. And for me, it's really not a conversation. I've never seen a group that felt that completely unstoppable. We've just never seen a group that had that much overwhelming talent. They had 2 of the 10 or so greatest offensive players to ever play the game. They had by far the greatest gravity force and off-ball weapon and shooter in the history of the sport with a top-tier isolation scorer alongside him in KD, who is also an elite off-ball scorer. And then they had another top 2 3-point shooter in the history of the game on the roster in Klay Thompson. And then they had this brilliant connective playmaker in Draymond who could brutalize 4-on-3s, who could facilitate out of inverted pick and roll. And it was just such a ridiculous ridiculously stacked offense. If you look at what they did across those 3 playoff runs, and I do look 2017 to 2019, I think the 2015 and 2016 Warriors are an honorable mention in this conversation. The regular season numbers are every bit as astounding, but I do think the difference in creation, shot creation that a Kevin Durant meant to this team, even Steph, honestly, just adding a little bit more strength in the 2017 to 2019 years. 2016, he was banged up in the playoffs, no doubt, but that team was more overwhelmingly dependent on him, and he didn't hold up quite as well in that run against a lot of significant playoff physicality. So I just think it's kind of a no-brainer that you take Kevin Durant, who was a top 3 player on the planet and a top 3 scorer in the history of this game, being added to that group. But yeah, I just think it's too many all-time great offensive forces in their own way coming together for me to take anybody over them. And I would still take the 7 seconds or less Suns too, just because I think that's the greatest run of regular season offense that we've seen this century. And what I think gets slept on is the fact that their offenses were every bit as great in the playoffs. Like, if you're just looking at the best relative offenses statistically, regular season and playoffs both, it's the Suns. You look at that 05 to 07 range, which includes 06 when they didn't have Amare Stoudemire due to injury, they were posting plus 7.5 relative offensive ratings in the regular season, plus 7.3 in the playoffs. They were just so far ahead of their time. Nash being one of the all-time great on-ball offensive engines, one of the all-time great playmakers, one of the all-time great hyper-efficient scorers, one of the all-time great transition playmakers, and just the totality of what they were able to do with pace and space and all the play finishing weapons they had, the pick and roll game they had. I just think you got to look at the results, and it's like, nobody was outpacing their peers by more on a consistent basis than those Suns teams. But when it comes down to it, I would still take the literally unprecedented talent of the Warriors. Then after that, I would go with this Nuggets team. I do think, though, like, there are certain paths to super easy transition offense, for example, that gave that Suns offense such an explosive ceiling. The 3-point volume relative to era that both those teams had gave them such an explosive ceiling. The Nuggets are very consistent. I do think they have the best offensive player ever, but those two teams also had some of the greatest offensive players ever and a lot of supporting cast that really did complement those guys perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have any issue with you taking the dubs. My thing is, like, what do you think about some of the historical things that the Nuggets are doing in this regular season? I get we haven't seen it in the playoffs yet. They're 4th in points per game in a single season in NBA history. That's in the totality of NBA history. They're number 1 in true shooting and effective field goal percentage.
This is why we look at relative offensive rating. That's the thing that is the measure, and that's where the Nuggets are currently on this best ever pace. You can't use points per game. You can't use efficiency without adjustment, because if we did that, all of the top
the league
15,
is collectively
20 offenses in NBA history would be in the 2020s.
The last 5 seasons. I completely agree. They are number 1 in both of those categories, though.
They're number 1 in relative offensive rating. That's the one that matters. They are on pace to have the best regular season offense ever, adjusted to league-wide efficiency.
I think Jokic is...
It has only been going on for 28 games compared to the Suns, the Warriors, who did this for 3 straight years where they were number 1 regular season and playoff offenses every year.
Jokic is just so damn good, and if we are going to do the thought exercise of having, like, Tim Hardaway in there slotted in that last starting spot, it still is close to me, man. Like, Jokic is that damn good. I put that much stock into Jokic and how good Murray is playing. Aaron Gordon's evolution as a 3-point shooter. Cam Johnson is a better fit than MPJ. Like, I'm just not ready. Like, man, all kind of respect to KD and Steph. Jokic is the GOAT offensive player. Like, that's why I think it's interesting. And the fact that Aaron Gordon and Jamal Murray are both at this, like, right. Well, Murray's playing an all-star level flat out. Gordon is at, like, this right sub-all-star level. You could argue him with how great they've been that he is at an all-star level. Like, I think it's close.
I don't know, man. Over 3 years, regular season and playoffs included, with Steph and KD on the floor together, the Warriors posted a plus 13 relative offensive rating. They had 2 of the most hyper-efficient, lethal, all-around scorers, especially in KD's case, being, in my opinion, the most versatile scorer in NBA history. Steph having probably the greatest single scoring superpower in NBA history, and arguably the most impactful single trait in terms of elevating his team's offense, his impact on rim offense for those around him, all of the wide open shots that he creates, if it's his off-ball gravity, if it's him drawing defenders so high out of pick and roll. and then the fact that they had all this elite shooting and this really good playmaking around him, and they were athletic. I just think the totality of that, again, I can't take anybody over, especially because I do think it's worth noting that, like, the Nuggets have run into issues in the playoffs over the last 2 years against the Minnesota team that was able to play two centers, right, and be hyper physical with Jokic out of the post and have Gobert roaming at all times. And similarly, again, take away some of those paint scoring opportunities Jokic could create for his teammates. And then OKC coming in with this sort of crazy swarm, and they're an all-time great defense. They knock anybody down a peg, if not multiple pegs. But both those teams were able to execute game plans that slowed down the Nuggets offense over the last 2 years in the playoffs in a way that we never saw the Suns offense slow down in the playoffs, and we never saw the Warriors offense slow down in the playoffs. That's all I'm saying. The Nuggets, I have third. And I already had the 2023 Nuggets only behind those two offenses. I now think this team is better because I think Jokic is playing even better after he had in 2023 the best individual offensive postseason run in NBA history, in my opinion. So we know how high I am on Jokic. It's not that. It is the sort of overwhelming talent that you get around a Steph Curry with the peak Warriors that's just so crazy.
That's fair, and maybe you are just factoring it in that. What do you do with the fact that I think the league is way more talented than both of those eras, too, and I think that they are. I mean, if we are comparing to era, I don't really think it's close. I think the Warriors are probably head and shoulders above anybody in their era. Like, I just don't think. And I think the Suns were so just ahead of their time. The Suns are close, too. I don't want to just dismiss them, too. Like, Joe Johnson spraying 40% from behind the arc, like with
in 05,
Sean Marion and Q Rich and Amari and Nash. Like, those teams are.
Barbosa, one of the most dynamic bench scorers.
Those Suns teams also were great in the playoffs, even when Amari was injured, too. You know, like that run when they had, what was it, Boris Diaw step up as the starter? Like, that's the one thing that also the other team that I don't want to forget about that I also wrote down here are like the 0-2 Mavericks or like the Nash and Nowitzki Mavericks. Those are another, like I'm just thinking about some of these other candidates. I don't want to just like gloss over the fact that, I don't know, those are some damn good teams that I think should be in pretty heavy consideration as well. And the last one I'll mention, actually two more real quick, two Chris Paul teams.
Yeah.
The 2018 Rockets with Harden and
14-15 Clippers.
Yes, the Lob City Clippers. Yes, I think those would all. Am I missing anybody? Those were.
Dude.
And the sorry, real quick, I'll get this one off too. The 24 Celtics, I think, should probably be an honorable mention.
Yeah, that's a good shout. I mean, just with the way everything was clicking for them throughout that regular season and that playoff run, I mean, it's one of the best relative offenses in the regular season in NBA history, and that was the one playoff run when they really did replicate, for the most part, their just crazy regular season offense. Dude, it's funny. I had like a best of the rest category because I kind of had a feeling we were going to talk about these three offenses as the top three, the peak Warriors, the peak Suns, and these Nuggets. And I had down 0-2-0-3 Mavs, 15-16 Warriors, 14-15 Clippers, 18-19 Rockets. So I totally agree with you when it comes to all the candidates that are in the same range. The other one that I would mention, though, and it would actually be maybe my next offense here, is the 2000-02 Lakers. What they were able to do, just shredding teams in the playoffs, especially, obviously, the Kobe-Shaq dynamic goes without saying, but especially just how truly unstoppable Shaq was at that time, how immensely impactful he was as, like, the greatest interior force in the history of this game. They were way, way outpacing their peers as well. But I think these are all good shouts. I think about this team for Denver compared to 2023, and the biggest difference probably, even though they are better in all of these ways, is just that they're doing it throughout the regular season in a way that they didn't that year. Like, that was, I think, the number 5 rated regular season offense. It was the playoffs where they were like, okay, holy shit, +6 relative offensive rating, clearly the best in the field, best 2-man game, best 3-man game, best offensive duo in basketball, best offensive player in basketball, right? All of these things. And they just had certain really unique special abilities. If it was their clutch time offense and just the several go-to plays they had that felt unstoppable. If it was the Murray Jokic 2-man game out of pick and roll or a Jokic post-up, And some of that was Jamal just playing at like the highest level of his career, him being so ridiculously good in that run in a way that he wasn't in that regular season. He hasn't been in the 2 regular seasons or postseason since until this year. And one of the significant things of that was his ability in that playoff run to lift some of the non-Jokic minutes to respectability. And that's what he's doing again this year. Like in 2023 in the regular season, the Nuggets had a plus 11 offensive rating with Jokic on, right? Elite, historic kind of stuff. But a negative 7.5 relative offensive rating with him off. They fell apart. They crumbled, which has been obviously their disease over the years. And in the playoffs, Murray was good enough that they were a solid offense, and that's part of the reason, an underrated story in their title run, is that they really performed decently in the non-Jokic minutes, and Jamal, to me, gets more credit for that than anybody else. But this year, they're doing it routinely over a 28-game stretch in the regular season in a way we've just never seen before. They have a plus 13 relative offensive rating with Jokic on the court, which is even better than 2023, as again, he's playing at an even higher level overall. But they also are a plus 3 relative offense with him off the court. That is the huge difference. The bench production you're getting from a THJ, from a Jonas Valanciunas being one of the more productive backup centers, and again, from Jamal in what he is doing in the non-Jokic minutes, where I believe they have a 118 offensive rating with Jamal on, Jokic off this year. I mean, that is just so much better from what they've had in recent years. Jamal is not only by far setting career highs in points per game, he's setting a career high in assists per game. Every single efficiency metric when it comes to 2-point percentage, mid-range field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, free throw rate, true shooting percentage, effective field goal percentage, like across the board, Jamal Murray is playing by far the best regular season basketball of his career. He's always been Mr. Play his way into shape, right? We'll see what he's like in the playoffs, and that works in the bubble and in 2023 when he does elevate in the playoffs. But the last 2 years, he hasn't been able to do that. Now he has just set a level for himself that is so impressive. And in non-Jokic minutes per 75 possessions, he's averaging 26 points, 8.5 assists. I mean, the playmaking leap really has been real on 63% true shooting. It's particularly, as it always is with him, just like this next level pull-up shooting. But the consistency of that has been different than ever before, because I've always loved Jamal. I just think he's a beautiful scorer to watch, but he has relied on an inherently kind of volatile style as a scorer, which is he's very reliant on a lot of mid-range shots, a lot of tough self-created jumpers, and he's great at those shots, but you're gonna inevitably wax and wane a bit just because you're not necessarily creating like that high percentage consistent offense around the basket for yourself at the free throw line, what have you. This year, though, Jamal is the most efficient pull-up jump shooter at volume in the NBA. He has an effective field goal percentage of 59.9 on pull-up jumpers. That is better than Steph, who's number 2. That is better than Shea, who's number 3. So you just have to be so impressed by him. And I do think compared even to the 2023 team, I do like the overall shooting of this group a little bit more, because in that run, Aaron Gordon was really a non-shooter, and he was treated as such, right? Like that was the whole, let's try out the strategy for the first time of putting a non-big on Jokic so we can have our center roaming off of Aaron Gordon. And he was the guy, kind of like we're talking about with Christian Brown now, where it was, he's overly dependent on being in the dunker spot, right? He's overly dependent on cuts for his scoring. Can you kind of cause their offense to slow down a bit doing that? And teams really couldn't. They could only do it for like short stretches. But him now being a 40+% three-point shooter on legitimate volume. Again, they don't have MPJ's like superpower contested three-point shooting off movement versus any level of contest. And he was great in that run. Cam Johnson is still very good, though. And now they have the THJ factor of it all. I mean, they are third in three-point percentage right now, I think, and 17th in threes made, which compared to the last 2 years, that's such a stark difference when they've been bottom 3 in three-point volume. And like you said, even Jokic is better. He's playing his most efficient ball ever. I mean, he's got his best free throw rate, his best paint touch numbers ever somehow when he's already been the GOAT there, his best mid-range shooting, his best three-point shooting. He's 58% from mid-range this year. This is an all-time great offense. There's no doubt about it. I'm just not ready to proclaim they're the best of this century, but I'm confident enough because of what we already have seen from Jokic, what we did see from a similar group in 23 that I now think is clearly better overall, that, yeah, I'd take them over anybody outside of those Warriors and those Suns.
Yeah, and I mean, right now I'd take Denver over everybody except OKC. I think Denver has separated themselves.
Oh,
I think,
totally.
to this point where they are just. It's like OKC's at the top, Denver's in that second tier to me, and then it's like everybody else in the league can figure it out after that. Like, I just think Denver has cemented themselves with. I feel like they've just been more consistent than everybody else, and like they may not have like the gaudy record that OKC does, but that offense is going to be something to reckon with come playoff time.
If things held as they are right now, we would be looking at the best relative defense in NBA history versus the best relative offense in NBA history. And I think the Thunder have a much better chance to hold that record. I think it's almost a lock that they do because they are so far outpacing. Well, right now, they have the all-time record. The bar for that is higher, though, because the 64 Celtics set a crazier defensive number than we've ever seen from an offense, and the Thunder are outpacing even that. But in terms of play-by-play era, I think it is almost a lock that the Thunder do set that record. I think they probably do set the all-time record. And with the Nuggets, I just think, it's already so much slimmer, right? Like, they and the 03 Mavs, as things are like going back and forth for the record, and the 05 Suns are right there. The 16 Warriors are right there. Like, they're much more in the clump, whereas OKC is separated. But the headline is, if you get statistically the best offense versus statistically the best defense, you're in for a hell of a heavyweight fight. I do think the Thunder are the more balanced team. I think they're the more exceptionally talented team. I think they're a true all-time great, but I agree with you. The gap between Denver and everybody after them is really significant to me. The last thing I'm going to mention, last year, the Nuggets were 11th in playoff offensive rating. And again, that's with two really tough matchups. The Clippers, who had the best individual Jokic defender in Zubats and were a top 5 defense overall, and then this historic Thunder defense. And in the 2024 playoffs, again, really tough matchup, elite defense that was built to stop them, but Denver was just 10th in playoff offensive rating out of 16 teams. So they did run into some road bumps there in a way that the Suns, the Warriors, who were number 1 playoff offense year after year, did not. So I just think I have to give those other two the nod for that. And also, probably the biggest difference, just to put a bow on this, is I can nitpick some of these half-court things that Denver's run into in the playoffs over the last couple of years. But realistically, with Jamal playing like this, and with a THJ to turn to now if Christian Brown is causing some of these problems for them offensively, this Denver half-court offense, clutch offense, is as good as any we've ever seen. It's 100th percentile. And by the way, they're also generating this relative offensive rating even as Aaron Gordon has missed some time, even as Christian Brown has missed some time, even as Cam Johnson has been kind of underwhelming, which is super impressive. But the half-court offense is every bit as good as those Warriors and Suns groups. But that's the thing. Those Warriors and Suns teams were also 100th percentile, all-time GOAT level half-court offenses and 100th percentile transition offenses. They were just so completely ahead of their time when it comes to that crazy combination of pace and space, just like impossible to guard in the full court. With Nash's full court passing and all the athletes and shooting they had, with the scramble to try to locate Steph and KD and Clay all at the same time in transition, especially when the Warriors did go with a 5-out group. They were just on a totally different level from Denver in the full court. And transition offense is the most efficient. So it does give you just that boost in terms of the easy stuff that I do think puts them over top of this Denver group. That really is the point to make, in my opinion. And I will clarify, because you brought this up, I am 100% judging all these teams relative to era. I think that's the only way to do it. That's how I do everything. Otherwise, you're just going to be holding it against teams for not having time traveled 20 years in the future. It's all about how much do you outpace your peers? How much do you excel in your time? Because skill, offense is constantly getting better in the sport. And if we just go with, okay, who is purely the best in a vacuum, then it's always going to be the best offense in the NBA today. And I just think that makes for boring conversations and discredits the history of this game, when I don't think in this century any two offenses have excelled more within the context of their time than those Suns and those Warriors. Guys, this episode is sponsored by Rocket Money. Managing your finances takes time. Canceling old subscriptions, tracking expenses, and sticking to a budget. Luckily, Rocket Money does the heavy lifting for you, automatically finding you ways to save and simplifying the process. Less stress, more free time, and a clearer path towards financial freedom all in one app.
Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. If you've got a goal you'd like to save for, Rocket Money can analyze your accounts to find the best time each month to put extra money aside.
Rocket Money really is extremely helpful when it comes to making you aware of unwanted subscriptions that you want to cancel and just generally keeping you very aware of where your money's going. You'll even get alerts if your bills increase in price, if there's unusual activity in your accounts, and if you're close to going over budget, and also just if you're doing a good job to let you know that as well. So Rocket Money has saved users over $2.5 billion, including over $880 million in canceled subscriptions alone. Their 10 million members save up to $740 a year when they use all of the app's premium features.
Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/nerdsesh today. That's rocketmoney.com/nerdsesh.
rocketmoney.com/nerdsesh. There's another team out west, Logan, that is going through a little bit of a slump right now. Although they did just beat the Nuggets the other night, but the Nuggets also beat them as part of this little slide that we're seeing from the Houston Rockets. They've now lost 4 of 6, Logan, including a loss to the Kings, a loss to the Pelicans, a couple of those teams at the bottom of the West right now, although the Pelicans are going on a bit of a run. But are you concerned about what we've seen from the Rockets in this recent stretch?
A little bit, enough to back off of them as like neck and neck with Denver, for sure. You know, that's the little slide that I think this team has had. Obviously, the big thing over this stretch has been the Rockets defensively. They're number 26 in defensive rating over these last 6 games. They've been number 6 in offensive rating. And I do think it's important to mention versus Dallas and Sacramento, there were no Steven Adams. That was a big deal in the Sacramento game. Maxine Renaud and Russell Westbrook go for 27 rebounds between the two of them. Sacramento beats them on the glass. That's a huge thing in any game for Houston. And then Sengun didn't play in the Dallas game, but that doesn't wipe away some of the bad in these games, and there is some real bad to look at. The last little bit of grace I will give Houston on this is a really tough stretch of their schedule. 4 straight road games for them. They've got 2 more road games before the end of this road stretch. They're going to play at L.A. against the Clippers and then at L.A. against the Lakers. So at this point in the season, they have 8 more road games played than home after the L.A. road stretch. So again, there's a little bit of fatigue maybe involved in some of these slumps, but there's some really bad moments. They blew a 24-point lead versus Sacramento. They blew a 25-point lead versus New Orleans. I mentioned the defense, and that is a concern for me, but I think they're going to figure it out on that end. Mm-hmm. The things that I'm really concerned about this Houston team, one, the three-point shooting percentages and volume. A lot of these lineups, and this is interrelated with some of the offensive issues that we're kind of seeing Houston run into late in these basketball games. There's not a lot of collective shooting in some of these lineups. The Rockets have a lot of lineups where they're turning to a Josh Okogie, a Men Thompson, and Alperen Sengun. Sengun shooting can be really problematic sometimes, where teams will leave him on an island on the mid-range and three-point land, and his shooting can just be really bad at some points. Same goes for Okogie and Amen. Okogie's been more stable than both of them. I don't want to just lump him into them. He's been better, but teams are still willing to gamble off of him. And so in these lineups where they're trotting out a lot of these non-shooters, and Jabari Smith Jr. Has had his struggles shooting as well. He's not really considered as bad normally as them, but he's had a stretch. What this does is late in games, it will allow teams to throw a lot of these double teams at Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun, and the offense will just melt down sometimes. And I really think this is where you're seeing the effects of the absence of a guy like Fred VanVleet, where you would just kill to have some stability there, a guy that can not turn the ball over, that can make good decisions, that can just get the ball to the guy who needs it, right? Just a stabilizing kind of presence and force, and that's interrelated with why they're struggling to close out some of these games. Just bad turnovers, slumping shooting, and it's ugly, man. Like, this to me is a Houston team that is really figuring out the growing pains of a lot of moving parts in their roster, and they're figuring out how to overcome some of these inherent roster flaws. I think this Houston Rockets team has some really elite strengths, that rebounding, that size. But I don't know, man. I think Udoka's going to have to get into his bag a little bit, Carson. That's just where I'm kind of at with Houston. I think he's going to have to tinker a little bit and find out some of these these lineup configurations that work. I don't know if that involves more Reed Shepherd. I don't know if that involves more Tari Eason. I don't really know what buttons the Rockets need to press, but I think you're seeing some of the flaws in this roster, and I think they've got to figure out some of these late-game offense kinks, man. Like, teams are just really figuring out how to make them crumble late, and it's something that you can't ignore at this point. It's enough of a flaw that we've seen over this recent stretch where, again, I'm not cooling off of them entirely as a contender, but they're going to have to clean these things up before I'm ready to pencil them back into, Denver or top 3 or legitimate West contender conversations.
Yeah, I think that you highlighted a couple of the exact things that have been concerning to me. I'd start with the clutch struggles. They've been a bad clutch team so far. They're 6-8 in the clutch. They're 16th in offensive rating in those spots, and that's really where they've fumbled a couple of these games to the Kings, to the Pelicans, blowing leads in what should be as close as you can get to an automatic win. Although, again, respect the scrappy Pels, who have won 5 straight as of late.
Yeah.
But they also haven't defended well in those key stretches, but it really is the offense that concerns me more, and specifically it's what you touched on with teams just blitzing the shit out of KD late in games. And I do think when it comes to them trying to punish some of the 4-on-3s that are born out of that, like their lack of shooting is a real problem. We talk about them being able to engineer like this totally unique offense where they're the GOAT offensive rebounding team, and they have like this unique combination of a super athlete and a man who can handle, and this point center in Şengün who can handle, and really their ability to generate extra chances on the offensive glass is so significant. They just get more chances at offense than anybody else, and it makes them a lot more efficient than like their raw effective field goal percentage or true shooting percentage might indicate, because they're just generating more chances per possession, really. But there is also inevitably the challenge that arises from having a lot of these big, very athletic, rebounding-centric lineups that are just more limited in terms of half-court skill. And, like, that's always been the question with Houston. It's where do they land in the battle between that being their superpower and that also being their limitation? Early in the year, they were landing more on the side of, hey, this is our superpower, and they were putting up ridiculous offensive numbers. Recently, I do think you have seen more of the issues that are presented for this team in the half court. Like, they do get some chances on the offensive glass when they have a 4-on-3, right? They've just got an extra body to attack the glass with as an already great offensive rebounding team. But a lot of these possessions, once you force the ball out of KD's hands, they're resulting in an Okogie 3, a Şengün 3. Like, these are the exact shots that the defense wants you taking, right? Sometimes I think the other Rockets look a little bit rushed in terms of how they're handling the 4-on-3s, but it is more so just a personnel issue of you've got several guys here who like want to be cutting to the rim when you're attacking a 4-on-3, specifically a man, right? He pretty much just wants to live in the dunker spot. And then the guys who are supposed to be in like your spot up roles, Jabari Smith, right, is a better shooter out of this bunch, but then it is these guys like Okogie, who is shooting the ball better this year, but realistically he's like a 30% career three-point shooter. He's a guy who defenses want taking that shot. Şengün, his early season three-point shooting is just fake. He's down to like 31% from deep on 2.5 attempts per game. That is still a total negative outcome for the Rockets if he ends up shooting a catch-and-shoot 3. So there is clunky spacing there. It is kind of easy to defend when you're like, okay, we know that we just have to take away basically these passes to the dunker spot, and if you find one of these subpar shooters for a 3 on the wing in the corner, that's a good outcome for us. And then there's also just like the possibility of getting in KD's face with a bunch of length and athleticism, forcing him into a turnover, or the last possession of regulation in the Kings game, Sacramento brought a double over and KD just shot over it. I mean, it's a really tough shot, but he's just like, fuck, man, every time that I give the ball up, we're fumbling the possession. That was a depressing watch because the Kings are lifeless. The Pelicans have a little life. They have a little energy. I'm watching the Kings and I'm like, this is the worst basketball team I've ever seen. And they literally just had to push one button and it was blitz KD. They did not have to be active defensively on the back end. They didn't have to be flying around. It was literally just make anyone else beat us.
When it's like
and
you said,
couldn't.
I mean, KD had an open guy, too, and he didn't even swing it. At that
Yeah.
point, he was just so frustrated. It's never want to be losing to the Kings, man.
No, you really don't. The 2026 Kings, you really don't. And like you were mentioning, Şengün has also had some really rough late game post-ups. In that game, too, I mean, he threw a pass off the backboard because he got doubled and kind of got caught on the baseline, gave up his dribble, and it was easy to cover whoever was in the dunker spot. And then there was a shooter in the corner who he couldn't wrap that pass around to. It's just like some of the spacing here is bad, and it really is a product of personnel. Şengün's shooting 40% in the clutch. And like, I've been impressed with his self-creation this year, but this is the thing that we talk about with him, right? He does not create easy offense for himself. And when pace slows down extra and defense is key in extra and the spacing around you isn't good, like, he can be forced to settle for some pretty tough shots. So you just can't deny the half-court issues that do come from this team being the lowest volume three-point shooting team in the NBA for good reason. Them playing, I mean, these lineups with 3 non-shooters frequently. It's incredible that they are as good of an offense as they are still, and it's a testament to all the things that they do at a crazy high level to offset their shooting limitations. But the double big look was so killer for them last year, right? It was like, we are just able to absolutely brutalize you, and we're generating so many extra possessions that it just doesn't matter. I mean, if we don't have shooting out there, we're finding a way to produce like a 128 offensive rating. That's what they did last year with Adams and Şengün out there together. This year, that's down to a 116 offensive rating. So the double big looks just haven't been nearly as effective as Şengün out there alone, where, again, he's your point center. He's a special offensive talent, and he doesn't have to worry about this fucked up spacing with another center out there. Or when Adams is out there alone, and he can just generate so many extra possessions with more shooting around him, with more perimeter skill around him. And both of those one center looks, they've been much better offensively. So, yeah, a lot of this stuff has just kind of regressed for them, and they put a lot on KD's plate late in games. And specifically interrelated with all this, we knew that this team was going to have to find wacky solutions to the lack of perimeter ball handlers on this roster, obviously, especially once Fred VanVleet went down. And I do think that's been another issue for them. Turnovers really picking up this season, and particularly in this recent stretch. Last year, they were top 10 in turnover percentage, and by that I mean they were among the 10 best teams in terms of protecting the ball. This year they are bottom 3. They have one of the worst turnover rates in the NBA, so that's another way in which their possession battle dominance that they generate on the offensive glass is now being canceled out more so by them giving it up with turnovers, whereas last year VanVleet was this great turnover suppressor who, although he had his flaws offensively, could take on this heavy ball handling load and not put their defense in a position where now they're defending with a numbers disadvantage off a live ball turnover. And every time they're getting up a shot, at least, they are missing Fred VanVleet's value in that way. So, look, they're still 3rd in offensive rating. They're still 4th in defensive rating, even as I would agree their defense hasn't been like as stellar and intimidating as I would have expected. To be fair, I think the gap between 4th and 9th in defensive rating right now is like 0.2 points. So they haven't been like right after OKC, which is kind of where I thought OKC is obviously going to be the best defense. I thought Houston might be that next best group, and they haven't been that, but they're still very good on both sides of the ball. Amen has totally picked it up this month, which is good because he got off to a rough start to the year, and he's still definitely part of the problem when it comes to some of these spacing issues, but he's giving you 19 points per game on 61% true shooting in December. So they're really good, but early in the year, I was like, okay, this team might be closer to Denver than I thought. And now I'm more so like they're closer to the Timberwolves and the Spurs than the Nuggets because of the half-court flaws that they do have offensively. I am looking forward to them getting DFS back because I think he's just a good player who obviously I viewed as a really good offseason addition for them, and they haven't had the benefit of his services yet. But specifically, I just think he's such an upgrade from Okogie as a shooter. And even though Okogie's percentages have been good this year, again, the volume isn't there. Defenses don't treat him as an actual good three-point shooter. DFS is a guy who consistently, last handful of years, has been like overall a 38% three-point shooter on like 5 attempts a game. That makes a big difference for them to have a guy who can shoot at that level on the floor. And he's also just a really good defender who brings even more size and length than Okogie there. Although Okogie is the better point of attack defender, DFS is better in kind of like that team help context, but it'll help them when he's out there, but it's obviously not solving a lot of these fundamental issues that they do have.
Yeah, I'd be tinkering. I think it'll look better for the Rockets. Honestly, though, I don't really see that guy down the roster for the Rockets, Carson. I think that this is probably a team, like, just looking at the trajectory the Rockets are on, I would be very willing to see what pieces I could maneuver to go out and get some guy that could help alleviate some of this pressure. If you had, I agree with you. I think there are a lot of issues for the Rockets, like we're talking about the spacing, the shooting, the ball handling. Is there one player or one archetype that would help fix them the most? And is there a trade candidate on this roster who you think another team would be interested in giving up said player for?
It's a really good question. I think there's two archetypes that you could look at. I think it is something of a volume 3-point shooter, really of any kind. And obviously, Reed Shepherd has been kind of the closest thing to that they have. And like Reed Shepherd is a really, really good 3-point shooter. Obviously, he's making 44% on 6 attempts a game. But I would like somebody who is a wing that can fill that void for them. And then the other thing you look at is really what I think after Van Vliet's injury, a lot of people expected the Rockets to go out there and make a trade for, and it is that legitimate ball handler, because although I think year 2 Reed, it's been encouraging overall, he's been dramatically improved, he is still limited as a ball handler, especially against perimeter athletes. He's very limited as an inside-the-arc scorer, so he does not fill that void for this team when it comes to that sort of stabilizing perimeter creator. I don't really know who that guy is. I think like the preseason dream that a lot of people were looking at is like, ooh, what if we can catch the Celtics in this transitional period and they give up Derek White? That's a total pipe dream now, because the Celtics are legitimately good without Jason Tatum, and like they just wouldn't move off of White anyways. I think that was always a real long shot, but now it seems totally impossible. I will bring up my boy, who I think is always kind of the bargain option when it comes to a legitimate dynamic creator, and that's Malik Monk. I don't know if they really have the contracts to move, though, unless it's some sort of deal where they say, you take on Van Vliet's dead money at this point, Sacramento, you're tanking, and we'll give you, like, a future first. Because I just don't really see, like, the contracts that they can pull here to match with Malik, because most of the guys they have on mid-sized contracts are, like, totally essential to them. It's like Steven Adams, DFS, who I do think is going to be important for them, Jabari Smith, Reed Shepherd, Amen. But that's somebody where it's like, you don't need him to be able to play 35 minutes a game. You just need a guy who you can be able to go to for 20, 25 minutes in one spot and say, all right, let's get another ball handler out there. Let's get another guy who can create dribble penetration, who can create plays for others, who can knock down pull-up jumpers. And they've got the defensive personnel to cover up for Malik on the other side of the ball there. So somebody like that, I mean, he's making $18 million this year. So yeah, if they give up Van Vliet and a first, and they would have to take back some small contract, but
I've got a couple of options on the wings.
They probably have to give up more than that for Malik. I don't know. Maybe not.
Malik
I'm
would be
confused
worth
by
it.
Malik's value, because the Kings clearly want to get rid of him. But then they also could have gotten Kuminga back for him. But they were going to give up a pick. So, yeah, I think maybe Van Vliet in a first could get it done.
Monk would be like the guy if any team needs to address this position. If it's Golden State, if it's Houston, he would be like the no-brainer. If you need an injection of offensive talent, I would go out there and I'd get Monk. I've got a couple of options on the wings. I've got like a high-end, median-end, and low-end option. Let me know what you think about any of these guys.
Okay.
Trey Murphy. Would Trey Murphy be acquirable? And
no. I mean, that's a dream, but there's just no way they can make that
happen. He is
happen.
the high-end option. The medium-end option, I think this guy's a little bit too valuable probably to his team. Royce O'Neal.
Yeah, I mean, I would like that, and he's definitely more attainable, but he doesn't really fill the void that we're talking
it's
about
kind of like
any better
still
than
getting
DFS.
A DFS, exactly. That's where I kind of came back with O'Neal. And then the lower-end options, I think they're more specialist and they're very acquirable, but I don't know if this team's they're good players. 2 Bucks, different archetypes. AJ Green is the spot up shooter kind of guy, or like Ryan Rollins potentially. If I don't know if the Bucks would be willing to give him up, but if they were, I think he would be an awesome replacement.
I think he's got to be pretty much untouchable for them. I don't know. He's just so good, and they have so little hope. But AJ, I think, would definitely be more attainable. But again, like what's hard is AJ Green better than any of these Rockets rotation players?
Exactly, is because when you're getting one of these specialists,
but not by that much.
It's this push-pull between, AJ Green can spray 45% from 3, but are we compromising our defense and, little stuff like that. So I don't really think there's an easy solution. What I will say is I think it's more important that they go out and they get this extra ball handler and offensive creator more so than a shooter. I think they can figure the aggregate shooting out with DFS, with Eason, with Reed Shepherd. I think they can find the guys on the wings. I think that ball handler role is more important.
I tend to agree, and I do think we've gotten to a point with them where it's like you should be trying to make that move. Again, don't move heaven and earth. Don't compromise your future, but Malik Monk, I think, could be a real bargain option, man. I think the Kings are low on him. I don't think there's as robust a market as there should be. It's a mid-sized contract that's pretty easy to take on, and you do have this Van Vliet money where if you can find a team that is so hopeless that they're willing to just take on that salary dump and say, yeah, throw us 1 pick, we'll call it even, that's something that, like, the Kings are willing to do. So if you find a team that's in desperation like that, trying to move off of a player who's probably undervalued league-wide, I could see that working out for them. I don't know that they need to be in a rush. They don't need to force it on the wrong player, but I do think they could definitely stand to improve in that regard. And yeah, I just can't have them in Denver conversations right now with how special Denver's offense is, how trustworthy that offense is, even though Houston has the better defensive personnel. I still just think the level of play that we are getting from the top 2 teams in the West overall, and specifically on their one, like, mega dominant side of the ball, it's just different from anybody else. And also, the Timberwolves and the Spurs are really good. Speaking of the Timberwolves, Logan, Anthony Edwards has been balling out. He just had a little bit of a rougher game, but second to last game, went out and had kind of a signature performance in a win over the Thunder, knocked down a massive go-ahead 3 down the stretch, stripped Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on the final possession of the game. With the level that he's been playing at this year, are you ready to say he's a top 5 player, Logan?
He's either 5 or 6 for me. I don't know where he is. To me, the question comes down, and maybe not to everybody. Maybe they have guys in a different order. To me, the question comes down to, would you rather have Anthony Edwards or Luka Doncic? That's what it boils down to me. And I think it's a really interesting conversation to have. To be clear, my top 4 guys, I couldn't take anybody over any of these guys. Jokic, SGA, Giannis, Wemby. Would that be your top 4?
Yeah. Well, Wemby versus Luka is very, very close for me, just because we haven't seen even 28 games of Wemby like we have with these other guys because he missed 12 games. But up to this point, I would say Wemby on a per-minute basis has been more valuable than Luka, yeah.
And so that's where I come down, is it's Anthony Edwards versus Luka Doncic. And initially when I read this, and I'm a huge Anthony Edwards guy, I went, no, I would not take Ant over Luka. Like, Luka is such a supremely talented offensive engine. Like, he's a way better playmaker. I would just want Luka more going into the playoffs. And then I started critically thinking about it. And the real conversation to me maybe isn't just which guy would you rather have, but like which play style do you prefer? Because Ant is more efficient than Luka in ways that won't appear in the stat sheet. And what I mean by that is, like, I just don't think Anthony Edwards has the propensity to waste possessions the way Luka kind of can, with bad shot selection, with bad turnovers, with this heliocentric ball-dominant style of play. And so I can see a world where you would go with one of these guys based on the team that you're building or just preference and style of play. Like, I just think Ant has an ability to be way more effective without the ball in his hands. He's way more of a defensive plus. I feel like he can be way more effective off ball. I think his shot selection is just way better. And obviously his athletic and physical traits, right? Like, Anthony Edwards is always going to get downhill. He is going to get into the teeth of the defense the way that Luka just hasn't shown an ability to, or not an ability to, but a willingness to, in the way that he did years previous. And so I wrote down on my notes, I would take Luka very, very marginally, because I think he is such a special shot maker and playmaker. But it's so close, man, because I think they're on different trajectories right now. And, I know maybe some people get butthurt about that. I think Anthony is trending upwards in a way that I think Luka is kind of trending downwards. And this is over, the past 2 years. I just think Ant is unlocking more to his game, the mid-range, the playmaking, the ball handling, where Luka, I don't want to say regressing, because regressing doesn't feel like the right word. Regressing feels like I don't know, tangible, skill development loss, but, Luka just doesn't seem like he's figuring out the things that he needs to get better as a player, while I feel like Anthony Edwards is. And so, in the way that they're trending, I think Ant is probably more likely to figure it out and to fully unlock himself and reach a level. But I don't know, man. It's a really interesting debate. I still feel like I very marginally lean on the side of Luka right now, but I can't act like it's not a debate. It is very close between these two guys.
I would go with Luka too. I just think the level of masterful playmaking, I mean, the gap there obviously is so large, and I don't want to ignore what Luka does still give you as a scorer. Look, his lows are ugly this year, okay? There's a number of games you can point to. We talked about this in the Shea comparison, why I don't think that's remotely a conversation when you talk about performance this year, although we still talked about it for 45 minutes with Jason. Shout out. To be fair, that was more so once I said, I don't see how Luka gets to be better than Shea is right now, and then we got all into that theoretical conversation. Everybody agrees Shea's been better this year. Although I will say, I was looking at the MVP odds recently. Shea's at plus 140 or something. Jokic is at plus 200. Luka's at plus 300. He's right there with them.
Hammer Shea.
Well, hammer Shea or Jokic, dude. It's a two-man race. They have been significantly better than Luka this year. Their teams are significantly better than the Lakers. LA bias and box score bias, I guess, because Luka is giving you 34 9-9 almost. And that is the thing to mention, right? He's giving you 34 9-9 almost. He does just create more offense than an Anthony Edwards. And I do think in totality, even though he does obviously have his turnover issues, he has his shot selection issues, where if you want to talk about regression with Luka, the clear area is what we've been talking about for years now, the diminished ability to get to the rim, or the diminished willingness to get to the rim, a combination of the two. He's getting to the restricted area a third as much as he was just back in 2022. So when you are taking, at this point, almost 11 threes a game and you're making 32% of them, that's how you have some of these clunkers that we were talking about, where almost 40% of his games this year, he has an effective field goal percentage below 50. Almost 40% of his games this year, he has 5 or more turnovers. And we just saw another one against the Clippers where, Luka sucked. The bad Luka games, especially when you add in how problematic he can be defensively, are really bad. But the highs, I mean, when he is just carving a team up, because he has been getting to the line 12 times a game this year, which, like it or not, is hyper-efficient offense. He has been really excellent as an inside-the-arc scorer because his short-range shot-making has just been so good. When he does have the three ball going at even a moderate level, I still think he's clearly the better scorer than Ant. He is significantly better as a playmaker, totally different tiers. So I would still go with him, and I would have Ant 6. I do think Ant versus Steph is still very close for me. I don't know. I came into the year saying I would still slightly take Steph over Ant. Steph has been even better than I would have expected. I mean, he's giving you 29 points per game on 65% true shooting. The guy's an absolute freak. He's a basketball god. He's 37 years old. But I do think Ant has clearly improved again. And this is the thing that you're talking about. He just gets better in some way year after year. And if you talk about trend lines, Luka, having had some of the issues that he has had in recent years in terms of regression in some areas, stagnation in some others, versus Ant 24, adding some layer of some kind every year. When we make this a big picture conversation, I actually think it gets more interesting, because I would have Luka above Ant right now. But I remember last year, early in the year, maybe even offseason going into the year. I can't remember exactly, but you said that you would build around Ant over Luka, and that really got people up in arms at that time. I mean, that was a serious kind of minority take. And now I think that would be a much more commonly held opinion, and it's probably the opinion that I hold. I don't know. I just think the ceiling for Ant, now that he is just a 40% pull-up three-point shooter on 8 attempts a game, defensively, he's really just fine. I mean, I think sometimes people look at athlete and they go, he's a great athlete, so he's a very good defender. He's definitely a better defender than your average, like, volume scoring guard, because a lot of those guys are smaller guards or, they're just not nearly the athlete that he is. So he deserves credit for that, but there's defensive talent there. And what's impressed me most this year is just how much his inside the arc scoring has improved. Because the thing with Ant that has never quite lived up to the expectation, and the expectation is monumentally high, is he has this crazy, crazy athletic skill set of like 99th percentile first step, 99th percentile strength, 99th percentile bounce around the rim, but he hasn't necessarily had that sort of like ability to masterfully control pace, get wherever he wants in the paint with this crazy footwork and body control, and then his rim finishing hasn't been elite in terms of efficiency. The degree of difficulty is high, but we saw this at times in the playoffs last year, which is like, oh man, Ant's missing layups. This year he's just been more consistent in terms of that really impressive paint scoring. His restricted area field goal percentage is up 6%. His paint non-restricted area field goal percentage is up 7%, and that's a big deal because that's been the other thing, right? We've talked about that intermediate scoring being kind of a blind spot for Ant ever since he was a prospect. He's getting better there. His mid-range percentage is up a little bit. He still hasn't really added that layer of mid-range volume, but he's even been a little bit better there. His free throw rate is up. I will say kind of everybody's free throw rate is up this year, which we may talk about later, but he's leveled up. Like, Ant just continues to get better. His scoring volume per possession is up. His efficiency is up by several points. I still couldn't take him over the overall offensive impact of Luka. That's a conversation. Wemby, I do think, just transforms the game differently. I mean, what Wemby does for your defense is so stupid while he is a legitimately awesome offensive player. But, like, Wemby has the Spurs as a plus 13 net team when he's on the court, and they're 11 points per 100 better with him on than off. With Ant on the floor, the T-Wolves are only a plus 5 net team right now, and they actually have a -2 on-off swing with Ant, which doesn't matter to me. I think obviously Ant makes them better. I think it's more a testament to like how valuable Rudy Gobert has been to this team and how much him just anchoring the defense has been like as essential to the Timberwolves as anything.
I mean, that damn defense falls completely apart without Gobert on the floor. Like, he is imperative. Yeah, I think Ant, I think you said it well, man. I don't have a ton to add on Ant. I think Ant just continues to get better and better, and adding little layers, dude. You touched on it. The finishing at the rim, the mid-range scoring, it may not be that drastic, but, like, these are little things that add up. And, yeah, I'm looking at that list now. I've got Wemby, SGA, Jokic, Ant, Luka.
And that was early last year, right?
I believe so. I think that was early. That was January of last year. And, yeah, I still do feel that way. Like, there were just some red flags with Luka then. There's some red flags here. And, again, it's a word trend to me. Like, Ant is – and it is play style. I can't lie. I do like the fact that Ant, and don't get me wrong, like, Luka does shit that Ant can't do. That's why he puts up these ridiculous playmaking numbers and stuff. But Ant can, I feel like Ant can fit in a little bit better, and he does some of the things on the, like the defensive stuff. He can do some of the things on the periphery that Luka can't. The big thing to me is the athletic difference, and I just think Ant is going to continue to get better and better at collapsing defenses and is going to continue to progress as a playmaker and continue to get better at a mid-range scorer. And some of this is due to the fact that Luka set some of the loftiest expectations of any NBA player ever because he had one of the greatest starts to a career in NBA history. That being said, I still do land on the side of I would rather build around Ant. I would probably take Luka today.
Yeah, that's very sound thinking to me. I mean, when Ant is going to overtake a guy like Luka is going to be when that playmaking leap clicks for him, right? When he gets to a place where he's consistently giving you 6 or 7 assists a game. Because right now he's such an elite on-ball scorer, but of the best on-ball offensive players in basketball, I do still think he is the most limited playmaker. Like, even a guy like Brunson, who is not a natural passer, is a significantly better passer. Shea is a way better passer than Ant. So that is where he's going to have to take that next leap. But every year it's something with him, man. He just keeps getting better, I also don't want to be the podcast that's always ragging on Luka Doncic as he's averaging 34, 9, and 9 on 60% true shooting. Like the guy is obviously amazing. But I do think he is not impactful as those raw counting stats this year would indicate, is really what it comes down to. And there's a lot of special players in the league. Speaking of which, Logan, the Luka replacement, the Dallas Mavericks savior by miracle, by rigging, whatever you think, Cooper Flagg is finding his way right now. And in fact, he just faced off last night against another rookie out west who is very much finding his way. We've got this awesome race for Rookie of the Month in the West, Logan. Cooper Flagg versus Derik Queen. Who do you got? Who deserves that acknowledgement?
I'd give it to Cooper Flagg. Derik Queen has really impressed me. I thought he was going to be good. I obviously just didn't like the value that the Pelicans gave up to acquire a guy like Derik Queen. It was never really about Derik Queen, the asset. Like, a lot of people liked the player. It was just merely about the fact that they gave up a really important pick for next season.
Yeah, I think that we do have to address that just a little, because I think the easiest take in the world right now is actually the Pelicans trade for Derik Queen was good. And it's like, guys, Derik Queen is really good. Like you're saying, that's not what it was ever about. Now, Derik Queen has been better than I expected. I had him 9th on my board. He has been clearly one of the absolute best rookies in this class. I would say overall this year, he's probably been the 3rd best rookie. But you just have to understand what that pick is going to be. Now, maybe Derik Queen is so good that he actually saves the Pelicans from picking in the top 3, and so it's not as painful. But this draft class coming up is just so special.
Maybe New Orleans lucks out and their pick just happens to land outside of the top 3 because the lottery is kind of a shit show sometimes. So that's very possible too.
It is, but also, like, they could have taken Queen at 7, and they took Fears, and to only move up 10 spots and give up that first rounder on top of, obviously this great prize. Derik Queen, I don't imagine they anticipate would have slid to 13, and I think they probably just really liked him, and that's why they pulled the trigger on that deal. But, man, watch A.J. DeBonsa, watch Cam Boozer, watch Darren Peterson in high school, because he doesn't play college basketball right now. It's such a special class, and sometimes I do think people can just kind of lose sight of these things that are easy to see coming. Because I think when we come back to this in 8 months, people are going to be saying, oh my God, how did they give that pick up? People can forget the big picture arc of things because they get caught up in the moment, and then the reality resurfaces and it's like, yeah, this is always how it was. Derik Queen is really good. Man, if that becomes AJ DeBonsa, brother, you'll never sleep again.
You sold the farm, buddy.
Yeah.
Also, I just think it's a bad look, too, the fact that Dumars hasn't had a job in 11 years in the league, and one of the first things he does is GM of the Pelicans is make that deal. So I think that deal was bad. I think it's always been bad. And I've always liked Derik Queen. Derik Queen was a top 3 prospect to me for a lot of the draft process. I slowly moved him down my board for some of the concerns, the three-point shooting, the defensive issues, which I still think are concerns with Queen positionally, but I liked his skill set, and I thought it would translate, and he looks great. I just think Cooper Flagg has been more impactful and just a little bit better. Coop is really figuring it out in a big way, man. This month, 23, 6, and 4 on 51% from the field, 58.6% true shooting with over a block and a steal a game. Most impressive things to me are what he is doing getting downhill. He's averaging 7.4 free throw attempts per game. He attempted 20 versus Utah. Granted, he was basically like the number 1 guy. He was doing a ton of initiating that game, but still super impressive. He has got 4 straight games now with 20 points. The only other person to do that was, I believe, 18-year-old LeBron James. At this age, to be clear, at 18 years old. He is the only 18-year-old in NBA history with a 40-point game, and it's not just in the half-court drawing fouls. He gets to the bucket with such ease, running the floor in transition. He's an 87th percentile transition scorer this season. He's averaging 5.3 transition points per game. That's not just this month. That is on this season. That is 17th in all of the NBA. This guy is just a special coast-to-coast athlete where, look, don't take this out of context, please. When Coop grabs that board, I kind of get a tingly, and not athletic. I get like a LeBron feeling. Not like he's going to fly to the other end and drop a tomahawk, but I feel like when that guy grabs the ball on that end of the floor, he is building up ahead of the steam to get to the other cup. Like, Flagg is a special transition kind of guy, and I really like him utilizing his off-ball scoring skill set more. Just like the Mavericks setting up little actions for him if it's a pin down, little stuff like that. Like, he's not a point guard, although I will say I think his handles looked a little bit dirtier recently.
He's getting better.
He's getting shifty, man. And not really like Coop hasn't been especially efficient with his dribble touches in the sense that he's creating a lot of space between him and the defender, but just his pure like shiftiness has impressed me, like his ability to get into that bag. I think he's got to figure the perimeter shot out, but a lot of these things I've been really impressed with, man. The defense, the transition scoring, the ability to get downhill, and he does look even more confident getting downhill to the cup too in the half court, where I want to give the bigs some credit. Routinely, the bigs will drop out a little Gortat screen to give him that full angle and runway to get easy layups off, and I think they've done a really good job of figuring out what his role should be within this offense. I think Coop has really flourished when Anthony Davis has been back and they've been able to slot him into a role. He's more comfortable, being just the number 2 offensively, but I think he's figuring it out. I think this is a stark contrast. He looks so much more, and I don't want to be cliche with this, but comfortable and confident. Like, Flagg is attacking. He's in a flow right now. And again, I don't want to get too cliche with it, but the guy's figuring it out. He's taking to it like a duck to water, man, the way that I thought Coop was. And I'm just excited for the new year. January 1st, December is where these guys really get it going. They start churning. January 1st is normally where we see these guys take off like a rocket. And I'm ecstatic, man. Coop looks awesome.
He does, dude, and I don't think there's anything remotely cliche about saying he looks more comfortable out there. I mean, it's the simplest and maybe the best way to describe it. We could talk about the technical improvements that he has made, but he has just fundamentally been put in better positions. I made a video like a couple weeks into the season being like, are the Mavs failing Cooper Flagg? Because they were putting him in these ridiculous lineups where he was the de facto point guard. I mean, he was literally the starting point guard for a while with the worst shooting in the NBA around him, with no AD because he was without an injury, just like these totally talent-starved, disgusting offensive lineups, asking him to pick up the slack as a ball handler and perimeter creator, knowing that that was the area where he had some work to do, especially when it comes to handling against NBA-level ball pressure. And he just didn't look comfortable. His finishing was out of sync. I mean, he was leaving some points on the board when he did get to the rim, but he was also just settling a lot with this very bad spacing, and the game felt kind of fast for him. So my thing was always, Flagg had some real issues early in the year. He was also being put in really tough spots as an 18-year-old rookie. And as I made that video and I talked about this is what's going on now, like my overarching feeling and what I expressed at the end is Cooper Flagg is going to get better dramatically as this season goes along. Cooper Flagg is going to be a great player. Like, there's no question about that. That is still the level of talent that we're talking about here. And this is just what happens, dude. I mean, when you drop an 18-year-old in a tough situation, he's going to get better as the year goes along when he's the kind of talent that Flagg is. Even last year, we saw him play up in college basketball, right? Reclassifying, 17 years old. Now he's expected to be the best player in the sport. His first 10 games at that level, Flagg struggled by his standards, right? He wasn't super efficient. He wasn't nearly as productive. From that point forward, though, he was the best player in the sport. And the month-to-month improvement we've seen this year has just been so damn impressive. I went on the viral State of the League podcast yesterday. That episode isn't actually up yet because those guys are such slackers. But Pablo Escobar, the great Pablo Escobar, said, it's a little bit Wemby-esque, just like this number 1 pick coming in with monumental expectations and getting so significantly better as his rookie year goes on. Obviously, Wemby is in a tier of his own as a talent. What Wemby did, like, actually fucking broke the human mind even as a rookie. But October, Flagg was averaging 13, 6, and 3 on 50% true shooting. November, significant improvement to 18, 7, and 4 on 55% true shooting. December, 23, 6, and 4 on 59% true shooting. And maybe the most impressive thing is that he's doing this as he still has not found the three ball whatsoever. And look, like, I'm not going to sit here and say that's a good thing. I wish that Flagg was making 35% of his threes instead of 25% of them. But the fact that he has been so good as a downhill scorer, shooting over 65% in the restricted area this month at more volume, getting to the line at the really high rate, as you're mentioning, putting together a more consistent intermediate game where he's shooting 49% on all twos outside the restricted area. So the floater range stuff, the mid-range stuff has been better with him. And I agree with you, just like his ability to chisel his way to a spot, his footwork in the paint, it all feels very controlled right now and very comfortable. And it's a level of downhill 2-point scoring that you're just rarely going to see from a rookie. He already projects as like one of those best downhill slashing wings in the NBA a couple years down the line. And you pair that with the passing feel that he does have, of course, and you see that when he gets downhill as a driver. And his defense is really popping this month, I think. It's been impressive all year, but as his offense has ticked up, he's giving you, I think, a steal a game and 1.3 blocks a game this month. And, like, let's not bury the lead. That's always been the greatest asset of Flagg's as a prospect, in my opinion. It's his all-around impact. It's his versatility. It's his ability to be good at everything. But I have always seen him long-term as probably a better defensive player than an offensive player, and I think we're totally seeing the shades of that too. So yeah, I mean, it's just such good stuff this month. I think that it does have to be Flagg, but I have also been really impressed by Derik Queen, and I just continue to be more impressed by him. So would you say some kind words about the big fella before we move on? Because he really is balling out.
No doubt, man. And he's so skilled. He is so ridiculously skilled for a guy his size. His touch is unreal. I just like watching Queen play. He is such a unique NBA player, man. It makes me...
Yeah.
It almost warps my brain. Like, it doesn't make sense sometimes watching him where he will just gracefully size up a really athletic, big, strong big man, shove his shoulder right into Buddy's chest as he busts out a spin move, and then flicks it up towards the rim, and it just kisses off the glass right into the basket. Like, he's so much fun, man. This month for him has been super impressive, too. 16 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists on 59% from the field, 64.6% true shooting, also at a block a game, just under a steal a game.
And some of the individual performances, I mean, he had the 30-point triple-double. He had the game where he went for 20-something. It was a near triple-double, and he didn't miss a shot. Like, he's just putting together some stat lines you very rarely see from a rookie.
Yeah, in long term, he's a really good scorer. He's very talented. He's got good feel as a playmaker, too. Some of his assist numbers, I think, can be a little bit inflated, a la like a Domantas Sabonis. He's a good passer. I think sometimes he can get some handoff or some, shots like that. But I will say, in the open floor, like when he's bringing the ball up in transition off of a rebound, he's got great court vision. Like, I just trust Queen with the ball in his hands offensively. And I think long term, I'm just excited about the prospect that he could develop that three-point shot. And I get it's a little bit of a ways away, but it's not something that we haven't seen non-shooters develop in years previous, right? Like, Queen has some of that mid-range shot making, right? Like, it's not like he's a bad shooter. He's just a bad shooter from that distance, from past three-point line. And again, I don't know if it's going to happen in a year. Maybe it doesn't happen at all. But like with shooting progression, you've seen from guys like, old dinosaurs like Al Horford, Brook Lopez, a new age guy like Aaron Gordon has figured it out. Like, I just think that shooting development isn't something that we could just write off for Derik Queen. I think it's very much on the table, and if he figures that out, he's a really great offensive player. Like, he's complete. He can score at all three levels. He can initiate. He can go on the block and cook. I just think Queen's really good. I don't know how much of this is going to translate to winning. I don't know really if we're going to even see it in New Orleans. And honestly, I don't know how much that matters right now. Like, New Orleans is so far away from being a competitive franchise that just having a guy like Derik Queen in the house that is a young building block that you can root for, that you can see the flashes of star potential with, it's enough. And I'm glad the Pelicans have a guy. At least he's going to be a little bit more healthy than, a Zion. So, I'm impressed by Queen. For me, Rookie of the Year race is really interesting, man. I mean, Khan too. He's up there. Flagg, I think, is my Rookie of the Year pretty clearly right now. But
Ooh, interesting.
you think
I think
Khan?
Flagg is
Khan
clearly
your
the guy who is pacing because the level he's been at, it's like
You think
he's
Khan's
gonna
taking it,
overtake Khan. I don't know if up to this point of the year I could say
That's
that
fair.
Flagg has been better.
Khan's
than
been a
Khan.
beast,
Khan's
man.
just been so consistent, and the offensive volume and efficiency you're getting from him, and also not an easy situation. Like just doing it from day one more consistently. But I think Flagg obviously is the best talent in this class. I think he's obviously the best long-term bet, and I do think probably by the end of the year he will be Rookie of the Year. I also want to see the Mavs continue to get him more post touches, man. I mean, they've been pretty selective with that. It's pretty much pure mismatch attacking, and like he's super efficient when he does work out of the post, though, and that was the case in college too. And I just think that's a way for him to leverage his strength and his footwork down there and his pretty good touch. But ultimately, I mean, his progress as just like a pick and roll score, isolation score compared to where he was in October. It's so impressive. But we're done talking about him. We're talking about Derik Queen, who is really damn good, dude. I think offensively, you just have to be sold on him. He's just electric. Like, he's putting up the numbers that you mentioned this month, and overall this season, he's averaging 13, 7, and 4 on 58% true shooting as a rookie in 26 minutes per game, while the two offensive concerns that I had about him as a prospect have like been valid in the sense that I was like, okay, he's not a play finisher, and I'm not sold on the three-point shot. I mean, he didn't have it in college, and he hasn't had it in the NBA, and he is still producing at the level that he is. It's really damn impressive. When it comes to his shooting progression and the upside there, maybe I'm not as optimistic as you are. I think the good indicator is he's 80% from the free throw line, which, by the way, Flagg also, who is not shooting well from three, he's 82% from the line, I think, on real volume. So that's a good indicator. But obviously, Flagg is just in a totally different world as a shooting prospect because he also shot 38% from three over a full college season on decent volume, whereas Derik Queen put up like 1-3 a game last year and made 20% of them, and I think he's made 3 total three-pointers this year. But even if I don't see like that same great mid-range touch, like I think he's only 32% from mid-range, he's like 39% in the paint outside the restricted area. What is so damn impressive about Derik Queen is the same thing that it's always been, but it's just translated to the NBA at such a high level already. The isolation game and the driving is just so fucking impressive, dude. He's already like genuinely an elite isolationist. Out of ISOs, he's 86th percentile efficiency on 94th percentile volume. He is just a wagon as a driver, dude. Like, too quick for centers. Great handle for a 5. Just ridiculous handle. He's strong. The body control is so good. The footwork is so good. I mean, you mentioned it, dude. Like, he can just whip that spin move at 100 miles an hour. I was watching a play from one of his recent games where he was like kind of posting up a smaller player from like 20 feet out, spun off of him, euroed around the help defender, and then just gracefully laid it up. Like, he's just got so much stuff to him playing downhill like that. He is a great at-rim finisher. He draws fouls at a good rate. So it's interesting to me because he is such a unique offensive player, and yet everybody's kind of doing like the baby Jokic thing, right? Like, that's the comparison that he's drawing most. And we've kind of seen that become the default for any like skilled passing big, Sabonis, Şengün. And I've talked about how I didn't like that for them, and all these guys are different. But honestly, if you are going to make a comparison for Queen to like one of the great skilled passing bigs in the NBA today, I think he is so much more like Şengün. Like, so much more similar. I think the size is so much more comparable with those two. They have that same, like, very face-up, ISO-heavy style, right, where they're predominantly initiating from, like, 15 feet out, facing the basket. They even have, like, obviously the same gifts as passer and, like, the same really impressive ball handling for their size. They're still different, but Jokic is just so different. And, like, I do think also Queen and Şengün both have that lack of play finishing and that lack of shooting where Jokic excels in those areas and it sets him apart. Like, when I say lack of play finishing, what I mean by that is Queen is ground bound, He's 6'9". He is not somebody who is very effective finishing off the roll, nor does he even screen and roll that often, right? And he's also not a legitimate pick and pop threat at this point. He can play from the perimeter, but he can't knock down those threes off the pop. Not any sort of lob threat. So that's where you're seeing low pick and roll volume and efficiency from him. And so, like we've talked about with Şengün, he really operates more like a perimeter creator than he does a center, whereas Jokic is a crazy freak. He does everything, but he is more of an actual center in the sense that he is, an excellent pick and roll scorer and these things where Queen is just not there. But I do think building an offense around him could still be a little funky because he's just like such a tweener between a 4 and a 5. And he doesn't do some of those center things offensively. And you do have this big who wants to operate mostly out of isolation from the elbows. And that just requires kind of putting a lot of perimeter skill around him and maybe another ball handling guard, but knowing that he's not going to enhance that ball handling guard in the 2-man game in the same way that a conventional, really good play finishing big might. Again, there's a little bit of funkiness there, but look, if that's the question that you're having about the 13th pick in the draft, that's a great outcome. And I do think this is a guy you should try to build an offense around. That's what's clear. The offensive talent is just so immense. What he does with the driving, with the passing is so unique for a center, much less a rookie, that I really think he's got to be their priority, in terms of a building block on that side of the ball right now. I do still worry about finding a role for him defensively because he's got good hands, but he really can't guard in space, and he's not a rim protector. Again, he's undersized and ground bound, and he hasn't been a good rebounding center. So he's just such a unique player, and that goes both ways, right? He has this unique, great ability offensively, but then it's also kind of a different team-building path and maybe a very specific one you might need to take around him, and he has these defensive limitations that you're going to have to try to work around, but I think those are all the reasons that he fell to 13, teams being worried about those things. Those are the reasons I didn't have him higher on my board. And again, he's excelling so much in spite of them. So I really like Derik Queen. I do think there's often this overwhelming enthusiasm when a guy is playing this well and is this fun. But if the things I'm talking about are kind of big picture, again, okay, is he a star I think you can really win with? Man, pretty damn good question to be asking about the 13th pick. So shout out to Derik Queen for sure. Monster.
I think they're valid. I think the roster things that you bring up are all really valid criticisms. That being said, Derik's still young, though. Still his rookie season. I think there's a ton of room to grow for a guy like Queen. And I'm just glad the Pelicans have. I wish the Kings had a Derik Queen. And we did, and his name was Tyrese Halliburton, and he saved me for a little bit. And I'm just happy the Pelicans have a guy, man. It's so nice to have a guy.
And also, I think Fears has had a good rookie season.
Yeah.
I think they should feel really good. They took a couple of swings on really big, unique talents, but also guys who had some questions about the downside and the fit stuff. And obviously, they're not being held to a standard now of, okay, how are they contributing to winning? They are just being observed more so as are these guys talents with upside? And absolutely they are. And I think we knew that they were, but nevertheless, you should be impressed by both of them, especially Queen. What he's doing is on a different level from what Fears is doing right now. So shout out, man. 5 straight wins. 5 straight wins. He's got him playing scrappy. And again, maybe he will keep that pick from falling in the top 3. We shall see. I want to take a broader look at an NBA issue, Logan. Thinking Basketball came out with this video that I watched recently that has kind of sparked just some of these thoughts in my mind about this topic. Do you think the NBA has an officiating problem? This is obviously a topic that comes up year over year, but there are some numbers this season that are different than recent years. Is that a concern to you?
Yeah. I've enjoyed watching basketball so much for 3 years now, almost night in, night out when the NBA is in. I don't really, get aggravated as much by bad calls anymore. I guess because I've kind of just become numb to bad reffing in a way. I just won't let myself get frustrated by bad calls because I'm not that Honestly, I would say that for the NFL too, dude. Like, if a ref misses a, don't get me wrong, Steelers game, I'll blow my fucking lid, like, obviously. But I'm just kind of used to refs being bad at their job. What I will say is, yeah, I think refs miss a lot of shit every single game in the NBA. I think there are certain rules that just don't get called anymore that should, like doubles, travels, guys picking up their pivot foot, shit like that. Guys will just get away with way more stuff. Carries, like, there's so much that I feel like NBA players get away with now that would have been called 20 years ago. Even though there are just certain fouls in basketball that seemingly don't get called anymore, I feel like there are still two things that are more prevalent issues in reffing than them missing little calls like that. I would say physical contact on drives, or not even just that. How guys officiate jump shots and grifting in basketball today, I would say, is one of the biggest ones in determining player judgment. Is a player deliberately trying to get a foul, or is he taking a real jump shot?
Yeah.
I thought Jason made a really good example of it when he brought up that SGA jumper, where SGA's foot placement moves forward to where the defender plants his feet, so he intentionally draw. Like, that's not a basketball play. I think that's an issue. And then I would say just consistency of physical contact reffed on a game-to-game basis, where some games it feels like teams can just scrap and go to war with one another, and then other games you can't breathe on the guy. Those would be all of the issues that I would have with reffing, but those final two I mentioned, I think, are a little bit more noticeable consistently on a game-to-game basis.
So just to speak to some of the numbers this year that do really stand out. Last year, we were seeing under 22 free throw attempts per 100 possessions league-wide. Now we're seeing 25 free throw attempts per 100 possessions. That is a big, significant difference. Last year, 10 players averaged 7 free throw attempts per game in the entire NBA. This year, it is 20. So twice as many players clearing those 7 free throw attempts per game. Offensive fouls per drive, this is a stat that was mentioned in that Thinking Basketball video, are down by about 40% compared to a little over a decade ago. So offensive fouls, big picture, way down. Defensive fouls, even compared to last year and all the recent seasons, are way up this year. And I think I have been very clearly on the record as pretty much the ultimate defender and enjoyer of the modern NBA. And I'm not here to say that the league doesn't have issues, but I do tend to err pretty strongly on the side of, hey, basketball is great. People complain about this thing too much. People complain about that thing too much. And that even applies to officiating discourse in recent years. Now, there are absolutely certain calls that I have disliked in the league for years. And I think the biggest thing is specifically what you're talking about, just with the really increased prevalence of non-basketball foul grifting. And there's so many examples of it, right? Guy feels a defender's hand on his hip and just immediately goes up with some bullshit shot in the lane that he would never put up. If it's a guy feeling that a defender's hand is kind of in the cookie jar and then he hooks him and he flails and he goes up, right? It's a total non-basketball play. This hasn't been as much of a thing in recent years, but you'll still see it every once in a while from a smaller guard, like a player jumping back into a trailing pick and roll defender and initiating contact like that. I mean, it's really a bunch of variations on offensive player initiating contact in a way where they're kind of crafty and they're making it look like a defensive foul. Sometimes by the book, it is a defensive foul, right? That's where some of these hand checking scenarios apply. But my solution to that is call everything on the floor, because we literally did this with the rip through, right? The rip through was deemed a non-basketball play, and therefore it is no longer given 2 free throws. So I just don't know why we can't do that as sort of a common sense thing with more of these situations.
Yeah, I was going to say on that point you made, don't hate the player, hate the game, man, because some of it is in the rule book. But that's an interesting idea. I like that. Because my suggestion for this was going to be maybe you retroactively, after the games have been played, even if the foul was called, maybe like fine guys a little bit for grifting and like, hey, like, but I think
you have to do it in the moment.
I think that's a much better way of curbing some of this. Is like, just don't reward them with points. Don't give them the shots.
Yeah, fines to me, that's pretty much impossible because it's like, especially if the ref gives them the call. I mean, what the fuck are they supposed to do? Like, it's all about how officials call the game. That to me is going to provide the incentives and the disincentives for how players play the game. And I don't think anybody likes this stuff. And I think there are solutions where you can say, okay, again, you can't have your hand caught in the cookie jar, but it's not going to be 2 free throws. It's foul on the floor, side out. Like, let's just play basketball because we've already, again, established that precedent with the rip through. But anyways, I'm saying that I have had issues with all of those specific kind of exploitations of the rules, and yet I've said big picture, sometimes people are just dishonest when they say like, oh my God, can't watch a game now. There's so many free throws. It's a stoppage of play every second, when it's like, well, last year, in recent years, free throw rates were at like all-time lows in the NBA, and part of that is just increased three-point volume, right? Players playing from the perimeter more. There's not as many like physical post-ups where you would get a lot of fouls in years past or whatever. But to say that games are being slowed down by increased foul rates was literally provably false up until this year, where now free throw rate is way up. And now it is at like one of the higher rates that we've seen in modern league history, and much higher than anything we've seen in the last handful of years as the three-point revolution has fully taken hold. So I do think that is a problem. I do think it speaks to overly offensively slanted rules that are being called with even more of an offensive slant this year. There's all the stuff that we've already talked about, but there is also like the element of just sheer force that offensive players are allowed to unleash, right? It's not just like that sort of tricky, oh, can I grift my way into making it look like the defender initiated the contact or whatever. Like, there is also the element of offensive players being allowed to use their offhands so aggressively. Offensive players being allowed to kind of just barrel into defenders, and way more often than not, getting the benefit of the doubt in a block charge situation, or being allowed to like level into a defender and use some sort of forearm shiver or lower their shoulder. Like, there's really 2 guys who I think about. And it's the opposite of what we often think about of like the Brunson, Luka, Austin Reeves, James Harden, Trae Young. Some people would put Shea in there. Shea, I do think it's more so him being allowed to use the off arm than it is him like doing a lot of the super grifty stuff like those little guys do. But Shea still absolutely does some of that crafty foul drawing. But the inverse also of like these super power guys like Giannis and Denny, just kind of being able to get away with whatever they want. I mean, specifically, I thought Ben Taylor in this video made a really good point about how like it kind of seems like in the NBA today, if you Euro into somebody, you have invincibility. Like, dudes are constantly allowed to Euro into defenders who appear to pretty much be set, and it's just like never called an offensive foul.
I feel like that used to be a charge, right?
It should be a charge oftentimes. And like, I just think there's a lot of possession where you look at a defender and you're kind of like, what was that guy supposed to do there? Like, is he really not in a legal guarding position? Is he really fouling? I mean, I was just going back and rewatching like a lot of Denny Avdia's most recent foul calls, because he's like the free throw rate guy this year, right? He's taking 10 free throws a game against like only 15 field goal attempts or something. It's crazy, crazy high free throw rate. And a lot of it are those drives where he is like coming full steam ahead downhill, and he's initiating the contact into a defender who is in a legal guarding position. And I also just think like officials have gotten so fucking down to the most minute detail of what constitutes a legal guarding position, while ignoring an offensive player lowering their shoulder, like doing these things where clearly they're initiating contact in a way that has always been considered illegal. And defensive players are just held to such a higher standard when it comes to the threshold they have to be at to not get called for a foul. So I think that stands out. And I also think, I mean, you were saying it, dude, but like just some of the no calls on travels. And part of this is the rules changing. The gather has changed fundamentally. What is a travel, right? It just allows players to move much more freely without having to put the ball on the floor. And I don't have an issue with that, honestly. I think the gather has created some like really cool plays when it comes to some of this paint footwork we do see, when it comes to obviously like the James Harden step back and like a number of step back jumpers. Overall, I think allowing offensive players a little more mobility on that front is good with me, but that doesn't explain why we don't call clear travels. Like anymore. I was watching the Celtics game last night. Sam Hauser took 2 steps off the catch and then dribbled, and they didn't call a travel.
Yeah, dude, I will see stuff like, I remember when I started playing basketball, I actually really struggle. I would travel sometimes when I'd catch a ball. I'd be on the wing or something, and I'd take a step before I dribbled, and I would get that called, and I'd get PO'd. I'd be like, I didn't do it. It was, it was so close, but even guys in pickup games would call me out, and I will see that nowadays during games. That's a good example. The other example that frustrates me even more is when they'll throw the ball to a guy on the block, and he's posting a guy up. He'll establish his pivot foot, and then it just I don't know if the refs aren't paying attention or something. He'll either switch it or he'll pick it up and he'll take 2 or 3 steps. I just feel like I never see those called, man, in any game I watch.
I think part of the challenge is I'm sure refs have been given the directive to lean on the side of leniency with travel specifically because you can't uncall a travel, right? And sometimes it is really hard to tell in real time, did the pivot foot move that slightest bit? When does the gather start exactly? And so it does make sense to me to lean on the side of allowing it when it's really close, but it has led overall to offensive players being allowed to get away with more travels. Some of these, again, just are travels, and the gather step is different. That's a rule. NBA players do not need to be allowed to get away with clear traveling. They're the most skilled athletes on the planet, right? They can play by the rules, and it's not going to damage the sport. I don't know. And I also just think that's only going to be a call or two a game. So it's not like you're going to hold back offenses. That just doesn't make sense to me. Officials can't be perfect, but it is a consistent trend. And then I think probably the most obvious, when we're talking about just a consistently non-called foul, is the moving screen stuff, where there's basically no rules on moving screens anymore. You can turn as you want. You can widen your stance as much as you want. You can hold the guy to force a switch and move with him.
There was one from Draymond the other night that I saw that was incredulous, dude. He sets it on this side of the guy. Steph catches the ball. He does exactly what you just said, dude. I would have been pissed if I was that defender, bro.
So many screens are moving at this point. And it gets to the point where, when one is called, I'm usually in support of it because I'm that was an illegal screen in some way. But then it's also if a ticky-tack one ever gets called, you're that looks like 95% of NBA screens. How can you call that one? Oftentimes it's just if you get an egregious sticking out of the leg, they'll call it or something like that. But it is pretty funny, some of the holding a guy to force a switch. There was a play of Jason Tatum, I remember last year, that I tweeted out, and I was how did he think he was going to get away with this? Because he literally held and pushed the defensive player for 5 seconds so he could force a switch. And then somebody was yeah, but that happens all the time. And I was you know what? You're kind of right. It is egregious, and yet it just happens, and it often doesn't get called. So there are definitely things that need to be improved upon in terms of NBA officiating. All these different things. And that's where, look, I don't want to make any one player the face of it. And I think, just to speak frankly, so often people do try to make Shea the face of it. And I just think that's so egregiously misleading and false, especially, this year he's 4th in free throw attempts. Luka is attempting 12 free throws a game. As I've talked about this before, but Luka is not drawing nearly as many fouls on drives, right? He is much more so reliant specifically on that grifting than Shea. I do understand people having their frustrations about Shea being allowed to use his off arm, but then I would say that's just how the game is officiated now. All these players are allowed to use their off arms, down to a man. I think Nikola Jokic is a guy who, in my opinion, gets big picture a pretty shitty whistle, although he's even getting more free throws this year. Again, that's pretty much everybody is. But there is that allowance of mutual physicality in that case, where often post-up play, you kind of just have to allow that jostling on both sides. So maybe that's a little bit different, but he uses his off arm a ton. Everybody does it, but I just don't mind those nearly as much in general. You're still making a basketball play. Refs have clearly gotten more lenient with what they allow offensive players to do there, but it is universal, and so I think using your off arm has just become a skill for NBA players, something that everybody is using to their advantage. And in terms of the aesthetics, in terms of the significance, it's just not nearly as bad to me as letting a guy lower his shoulder into a defender on a drive and calling that a defensive foul. Or, again, all these non-basketball grifty plays. I do continue to think Austin Reeves is the biggest foul grifter in the NBA, though, probably, and the most dependent on it. And I was thinking about this, and I'm worried about Austin Reeves in the playoffs because I'm worried the exact same thing that happened last year might happen again. He's better, but he's got this like 0.55 free throw rate. So for every 100 shots, he's taking 55 free throws, right? And that just boosts his efficiency so much. And when he got into a playoff series against the Timberwolves where they allowed them to play super physically, and he already has these struggles against these really athletic teams in the regular season, we've seen it, but once that physicality and intensity ratchets up, he just looks so physically overwhelmed. He wasn't getting any calls. He wasn't getting to the free throw line at all. So I do think, like, for the most part, the best guys are the best guys. And the difference of maybe a call or two a game between the regular season and the playoffs isn't going to make a difference. But I do wonder now if, like, we are seeing some guys, and I won't use the term free throw merchant because I resent it so much because I think it gets so misused. But I don't know. I'm thinking about, like, Keontae George. And I'm like, the whistle he gets in the regular season. You know, some of these guys who are taking 7, 9 free throw attempts a game now.
Well,
it's like
and those
crazy.
guys get downhill, but it's like a lot of their game is really predicated from the perimeter too. And so if they're not getting those calls in the playoffs, it just takes their scoring floor down by so much. Like,
for sure. And those guys get downhill, but neither of them get to the rim very much. Neither of them are the sort of imposing athletes, right? And Reeves, really, so much of it is crafty foul hunting. And look, it's a skill. It's valuable. I am always a believer. Getting to the free throw line is a good thing. To say otherwise is stupid. Don't get caught up in your basketball ethics, whatever. A vast majority of the greatest players in the history of this game were also some of the best at getting to the free throw line. When you're really hard to guard, you're really hard to guard without fouling. That is the general truth of it. So that's where, again, I don't make this about any one player, but I do just think the difference we're seeing between regular season officiating and playoff officiating is clearly the biggest it's ever been. And that's the final point that I'll make here. And the reason that, even though, you know, it was nice to get a little venting out here, I am Mr. Positivity, big picture with the NBA. I do have some of these specific frustrations with officiating. It doesn't really inhibit my enjoyment of the game. I love it. I think the skill is just so impressive and the quality of play is higher than ever before. But when basketball is at its best, is in the playoffs. Bar none. I think we all agree. And I think we can also all agree that the game is fundamentally officiated so differently. And when you allow defensive players more hand checking, more physicality, you make it a more balanced game. You ultimately make it a better game because offense is still great, right? But you don't want the offense to feel too easy. And there are certain times in the regular season where it does, but in the playoffs, I really don't feel that way. And so that's where I just think we should be moving towards something closer to playoff officiating for the entire year.
Agreed.
Because I was looking at this, and throughout the course of NBA history, for the most part, offenses get more efficient on average in the playoffs. Or what I should really say is playoff offense is a bit more efficient than regular season offense. And the reason for that is pretty simple. Better offenses make it into the playoffs, right, than your average teams in the regular season. So that's kind of what you would expect, unless there is some sort of significant difference in how the game is played. That's what we're seeing now. These last 4 years, offensive rating has dropped in the playoffs compared to the regular season pretty considerably. So that trend has been bucked, but I also think that makes sense. Like, I think we have this expectation now in the NBA of like, oh yeah, offense gets harder in the playoffs, right? It is more physical. Defenses play a little harder, sure, but refs also just allow a lot more contact. When in reality, like, there hasn't always been that difference between the regular season and the playoffs. It's mostly been offenses are a little bit more efficient in the postseason, and now it's really become the opposite. But it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing, you know, offensive ratings being at 113 instead of 115, 116. It may not sound like a big difference, but it's just those few calls a game that really don't need to be given to the offense that do make a little difference and make the playoff product the best. I think playoff basketball is perfect. I think the refs actually do a really great job. I think it's awesome, the physicality that we see allowed there. I would just like to see something closer to that for the entire year, and it just makes that little difference that does matter.
Completely agree.
And that's even as foul calls go up in the playoffs. They always do, but that's because the game is so much more physical that on average, like, you are still allowing much more physicality. You're calling a couple more fouls, but that's because there are way more quote unquote regular season fouls that are going uncalled overall. And so it's overall definitely a positive trade-off that we get in the playoffs. It's interesting, Logan. I love the NBA. God knows I love the NBA. And I love NBA Christmas. I cannot wait for this slate of games that we've got. Holy crap, Logan. Should we look at them all? Should we take a glance at everything that we've got coming up? Cavs, Knicks, Spurs, Thunder, Mavs, Warriors. That's not going to be as good as I would have hoped. Rockets, Lakers, and Timberwolves, Nuggets, though. Come on. NBA Christmas.
It's a sexual
Mogs.
slate, man. It is a sexual. Fuck the NFL, man. Y'all shouldn't be playing games. Let them boys go chill with their family, man.
I tend to agree. There are a bunch of family guys in the NFL.
Even at my lowest, I'm still a family guy.
Real shit. We will see you guys day after Christmas, Boxing Day, as they call it in the British Commonwealth. And we're going to talk about all those games. So, to all who celebrate, hope that you have a wonderful Christmas. We will see you very soon. And our gift to you is content, baby. This episode, our NFL reaction to Week 15, our trivia episode we did with Spawn Hour last week, all that good stuff. You can find it all on our YouTube channel. You can listen to it across all audio platforms, and you can find all of our short-form content, trivia, clips from the show, graphics from the show, across our social media pages. So, with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.